Hello there, this is Instructor Paul, and in this lecture, we're going to configure our ITFROUTE01 server to connect our two private networks together. Now, you can see here that I have a fresh install of Windows Server. I haven't renamed it, haven't joined it to a domain, and I have two Ethernet adapters. Now, if you remember, Ethernet 1 is connected to the NAT network that we created in the beginning of this course, which is 192.168.0.0, and now we have Ethernet 2, which is attached to the new NAT network that you should have just created with the IP of 192.168.2.0. So what we need to do first is configure these Ethernet adapters. So I'm going to left click on the blue text here and open this up, and we can see Ethernet 1. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to choose properties. Okay, so we're going to uncheck IP version 6 and we'll select IP version 4 and we'll choose properties. Now we're going to say use the following IP address, and we're not going to define any of these settings except for the IP and the subnet mask. So this is going to be 192.168.0.20. Okay, and we'll click OK. And that message just said we haven't populated a subnet mask. It auto-populated it for us. Now we'll click OK, and we'll save the settings. We'll hit close. Okay, so now we're going to go to Ethernet 2. We're going to right click and choose properties and repeat the steps, but this time for the new subnet. So we're going to go to Internet Protocol version 4 and we'll choose properties. And we're going to say use the following settings and we'll type in our new subnet. So .2.20. Okay, so this .20 is going to be the default gateway for all of our VMs that fall under this subnet of 192.168.2. And same goes for our other network. We're going to have to update our ITF01 server to use the gateway of .20, okay? So that will tell that domain controller to send its traffic through this router VM. All right, and again, we don't need to mess with the gateway or the DNS servers. We'll click OK, and we'll click Close. All right, so now we're done configuring our IP settings. What we're going to do now is close network connections, and we're going to add the remote access server role. So let's click Manage, and we're going to click Add Roles and Features. Okay, so this is just like we've always done it. We're going to click Next. We're going to say Role-Based or Feature-Based. And we're going to select the server from the pool. We'll click Next. And we're going to go down here and select Remote Access. So we'll click the check mark there. And it's just thinking for a second, but this is going to require a couple different features. So we'll click Next. And we're going to click Next again. And here's Remote Access, just all informational. You can read over this if you'd like, but we're not too worried about this. We're most concerned with this RRAS routing features. So we're going to click Next. And we want to check the routing checkbox, and we'll click Add Features when this little window pops up so that we get all of the required features. Okay, so we'll click Add Features, and we can see it also adds a direct access and VPN. That's fine, but we're not really going to be messing with that. Now we're also adding the IIS server role, which is again perfectly fine. The default settings for this is going to be just great. So we're going to click Next, and we're going to click Install. Now this installation, I'm guessing, is going to take about 15 minutes. So again, like usual, go ahead and pause your video. I'm going to speed up this video and come back to this once your installation is complete. Okay, so this installation is complete. So we're going to go ahead and click Close. Okay, so now what we're going to do is in the top right-hand corner of Server Manager, we're going to select Tools, and we're going to choose Routing and Remote Access. And we're going to expand this window, and I'm going to expand this pane out here. Okay, so we're going to right click on our server here, and we're going to say configure and enable routing and remote access. And we're going to get this little wizard here. We're going to click Next, and we're going to choose the option secure connection between two private networks, that's what we're trying to do. We have two different subnets and we're trying to connect them together. Okay. And you can see here, it even says connect this network with a remote network, such as a branch office. Kind of sounds like an Active Directory site, doesn't it? So we'll click Next. And now we can choose if we want demand dial. That is outside of the scope of what I'm trying to teach here. We're just going to say no, and we're going to click Next. Okay, so now before we click Finish, we need to open this on the firewall. So I'm going to do that really quick. And I'm just going to click on Windows Firewall where it says Public On. And I'm going to say allow an app or feature through Windows Firewall. And we're looking for routing and remote access. So we're going to go ahead and click this check mark, and we'll check it for both, and we'll click OK. All right, now that should get rid of all the firewall warnings, but we'll check it when we click Finish. Okay, so this is the warning message just saying it was unable to open the ports, but we already did that, so we can just ignore this. So it's saying right here, manually open the ports. We just did that. So we're going to click OK. And now we need to just wait for this little wizard to finish. It's going to take a second, and then we're going to have a set of options that we can do over here on the left-hand side of the screen. So we can see here it says, please wait while routing and remote access services finishes its initialization. So now we can expand this little drop down here, and we can look under IP version 4, and we can select general, and we can see that we have our links established. So we have Ethernet 2, and we have Ethernet. We can see that they're each on their own subnets. So now what we need to do is configure our ITFDC01 server and our ITFDC02 server. And what I mean by configure is configure the IP settings for each server. So first, we need to change ITFDC02 to be on the new subnet. And then for both servers, we need to configure the gateway to be 2.20, okay, or .0.20, which is the IP address of this local server. Okay, so before we go ahead and configure these two VMs, I'm going to allow ping requests on this server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Windows Firewall, and I'm going to select Advanced Settings. Next, I'm going to choose Inbound Rules, and I'll say New Rule. Okay, so here we're going to choose Custom, and we'll click Next. And we're going to say All Programs. And the protocol type is ICMP, which is right here, version 4. We're going to click Customize. And we're going to make sure that this says all ICMP types. We'll click OK. We're going to click Next. And we're going to leave the scope at any IP address. We're going to say allow the connection. And we're going to say domain private and public. And we're going to name this ICMP version 4 ping requests. And we'll click Finish. Okay, so now we should be able to ping this server, and we should be able to get a response. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my ITFDC02 server, and I'm going to configure these IP version 4 settings. Okay, so I'm logged into my ITFDC02 server, and we can see here right away that the Ethernet configuration is still using the old settings. So we're going to click on this, and we're going to right-click on Ethernet, and we're going to choose Properties. Now we're going to select IP version 4 and we'll choose properties again. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to .2. And the default gateway is going to be on the .2 subnet. And it's going to be that IP address that we just configured, 2.20. So now what we're using is 192.168.2.11. And our default gateway is going to be the IP address of our new router VM. Again, we need to change this alternate server to be the .2. So 192.168.2.11, because that's the IP address of this server. So now we'll click OK. And remember that I did switch this computer over to the new NAT network that I just created. All right. So that is all we need to do on this server. Let's make sure that we can ping that router VM. So I'm going to type in ping 192.168.2.20. And we can see we're getting a reply. So the connection is good from here to the router. So now what we need to do is update our ITFDC01 server and make sure that we configure the gateway to be .1.20. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I'm logged into my ITFDC01 server. So I'm going to click on the Ethernet settings here. And I'm going to right click on Ethernet and I'm going to choose Properties. And we're going to select Internet Protocol version 4 and we'll choose Properties again. Here's the IP settings of our ITFDC01 server. Now we're not going to change the IP address because this is on the other subnet, the old subnet that we created at the beginning of this course. But our default gateway has changed. And you remember, we set it to .20. So on ITFDC02, since it's on the second NAT network that we just created, it's using the .2 subnet. But since we're on the old NAT network, that is attached to the ITFROUTE01 server, we're going to use the adapter or the IP address of the adapter that's on the same subnet of this server. So again, we're going to update this alternate DNS server to be the IP address of ITFDC02, and we'll click OK. So we're going to be routing all of our traffic through our ITFROUTE01 server, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to click OK and click Close. And now what I'm going to do is open Command Prompt, and I'm going to attempt to ping the ITFROUTE01 server. So instead of typing the host name, I'm going to type in 192.168.0.20. And we can see that I'm getting a response. So I actually have my firewall dropped on ITFDC01 and ITFDC02. So I should be able to ping each of these servers. So what I'm going to do is try and ping it now. So I'm going to say 192.168.2 See, I'm going to the other subnet, .11. I'm going to press enter. And we can see that I'm getting a response from the IP address or the server that's on the other subnet. Now I'm going to switch over to my ITFDC02 server and try to ping ITFDC01. So let's give that a shot and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so I'm logged back into ITFDC02. So what I'm going to do is go to command prompt and I'm going to try and ping ITFDC01, which is 192.168.0.10. If I press enter, we can see that we are able to get a response. So our two separate subnets are now connected with ITFROUTE01. Okay, so both VMs are able to communicate with each other and we have both private networks communicating with each other through our ITFROUTE01 server. So that is all we're going to do in this lecture. Now, you should go through and update your ITF workstation server and the ITF WSUS server. Any other servers that are on your network now need to use the new gateway of 192.168.0.20. So anything that's on that old subnet. Any new computers that you add on the new subnet, you need to configure the gateway to be 192.168.2.20. Okay, so that's all we got to cover in this lecture. Great job getting through this one, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.